Happy Tuesday. Pitchers and catchers reported yesterday, but as we found out today, not all the pitchers are at Reds camp just yet. Announcements coming out of Arizona earlier today on Tuesday. The Reds adding to their bullpen. We'll get into that in just a moment. Nick, welcome in. How we doing, buddy?
Doing good. Didn't expect any more major league signings, so that's kind of a pleasant surprise in itself. Not a massive major league signing, but more than I expected the rest of the off season.
Yeah, well, we knew. Well, I'm going to hold before we get into it. Let's take a moment. We'll recognize our sponsor, Deep South Commodities.
Yeah, as always, Chatterbox Reds proudly sponsored by Deep South Commodities. DSC is a leader in renewable commodities for biofuel production, specializing in used cooking oil collection, aggregation, and sales. Visit www.deepsouthcommodities.com for more information. Thanks, as always, to our friends at DSC.
Thanks to John and his team. Oh, look, Nick, we knew with the Brandon Williamson and Julian Aguiar injuries that the Reds were going to have additional spots on their 40-man roster. Didn't know for sure how those roster spots would be used, whether it be with guys currently invited to spring training. Find out today. It looks like those spots will be used on additional arms. Let's start with the major league signing. They made two bullpen signings today, but let's start with the major league signing. Reds go out and sign Scott Barlow to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. Barlow spent last year with your Cleveland Guardians, Nick. How do we feel about Scott Barlow?
This is a high upside signing, so you like that. I think that we had talked a little bit ago after the Rogers. It'd be nice if the Reds went and got some high ceiling minor league guys. Well, they got a high ceiling major league signing. Scott Barlow last year was really good through August or through July. I'm sorry. He started out with Cleveland as their like 7th, 8th inning guy early on in the year. At the end of July, he had a 3.12 ERA, but August he completely fell off the rails. Actually ended up getting DFA'd in September, which is interesting. Obviously, Cleveland had a historically good bullpen, so getting DFA'd by Cleveland late in the year, I don't necessarily think is a massive negative thing. Like if you got DFA'd by, I don't know, the Reds actually had a pretty decent bullpen, but other teams, it might be a little more alarming. But interesting that he didn't get picked back up again after getting DFA'd. Now, he wouldn't have been playoff eligible, so none of the playoff teams would have really had some massive motivation to get him. I don't know if he just, said, hey, I'm going to shut it down. He threw a lot of innings. He threw 55 innings, pitched in, I think, 60 games last year, 63 games total. So he pitched a lot. Maybe he just, I had a really bad August, September. I'm just going to shut it down for the year. I'm going to try to, get myself back healthy. Maybe there was some sort of injury that we didn't, all those sort of things are possible. But definitely a high upside arm. I mean, he's definitely got some swing and miss. His average exit velocity against him is one of the best in baseball. Gets a high whiff rate. Don't hit barrels against him, all that kind of stuff. Kind of a pedestrian year last year with a 4.25 ERA. There's things that you can look at that would make you go, wow, this guy could really be a really good pitcher. There's also things that you can look at and go, this guy is maybe seen his best days are behind him. For $2.5 million, I think it's a good risk for the Reds. If it doesn't work out and you have to DFA him in June, well, so be it. You took a shot, but I think you took a shot here in the right direction to give you a chance to add a real high upside arm.
Yeah, you touched on some of the things that I wanted to talk about, but ultimately it's interesting for me. Barlow is a guy who either could be like your last option out of the pen, either an inning eater or a guy who just, maybe in a blowout you need an inning out of. But I feel like he does have the ceiling where he could come in and almost be your 8th inning guy with his swing and miss numbers. The Reds don't necessarily have a lot of those swing and miss guys in the bullpen this year. Obviously, Alexis Diaz will hold down the closer role, but Beyond that, with Tanner Scott, there's some questions about what that'll look like. You mentioned a high K rate. I mean, last year, despite the fact that he got DFA'd, 85th percentile in K rate. His whiff numbers, the 92nd percentile, barrel 74th percentile. The challenge that he had was obviously his control, and that's ultimately, I think, what led to his release. 14th percentile, walking 13% of the batters that he faced last year. Not good enough, obviously, especially on a playoff team who's making a run with the Guardians. So it'll be interesting to see if there was an injury there that played into it, or if it was just a mental thing or what happened. But like you said, 1 year, $2.5 million. I mean, didn't stop him from signing Mike Ford last year. So I guess they'd be more than happy to eat that if necessary. So we'll see. Last 4 years, 71 appearances, 69 appearances, and then back-to-back 63 appearance years. So definitely a guy who's able to eat some innings and a little bit of a rubber arm out of the bullpen. The other signing, Nick, a minor league deal on a guy who some people think that maybe this should have been reversed and Barlow should have got the minor league deal, but right-handed pitcher Josh Staumont signs to a minor league deal. He had a 3.7 ERA in 25 games last year with the Twins. What's your reaction to adding Staumont?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the underlying numbers are completely flipped, though. I mean, I think that there's not necessarily maybe the same upside with Staumont. There was a reason that he was, up and down between the majors and the minors throughout the year last year. Had a weird year. Like, he didn't really strike out a lot of batters in the big leagues, but he's actually been pretty good at getting swing and miss throughout his career. Again, it's a pretty small sample, 24 innings. Don't want to make a whole lot out of. But another just, quality option. I mean, that's what I view him more as is, when you put him on the list of pecking order going into spring, it's a lot better than whatever he fits, whether he's the fourth guy on the outside looking in, if we're talking about the bullpen bubble or something like that. He's better than whatever was there before. I think that Staumont, if the Reds had signed him maybe about a month and a half ago, I would be coming on here a lot more excited. But because the Reds have added so many other options, it honestly, it's a little harder for me to go, yeah, I think this guy's going to make the team. Does he have a chance? Sure. Yeah. I mean, he has a chance. He has a big league experience. But if I had to bet on it, I would bet he doesn't make the team. So I don't want to necessarily go too far into a guy that realistically probably needs a lot of things to go right to make the big league team.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of these minor league deals for some of these veterans is if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, most of the time they have the option to opt out in June. We haven't seen the contract details for sure. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But Staumont's still only 31 years old, a guy that used to have a ton of velocity. It's dipped a little bit in recent years, it looks like, but definitely another potential high upside guy that if he does figure it out, that maybe can contribute to this bullpen. And if nothing else, add some depth. And what we've seen all off season long is that this Reds team is really valuing depth, especially on the mound. So another guy with major league experience. And if we take a look now at the depth chart with this bullpen, you'll see so many guys who are quote unquote options, but have major league experience. Everything from Graham Ashcraft as a starter to Carson Spires, who made appearances last year, all the way down to veteran guys like Brian Shaw, who are, again, long shots to make this roster, but have a ton of experience.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that stands out to me is how many of these guys that are on minor league invites have substantial big league experience. I don't know if I remember a year where there was that much of that. But Craig, where I'm at kind of overall with this bullpen, about 6 weeks ago, I saw it as a glaring concern. I don't necessarily think this is some sort of surefire fix. Like, this is great. Now I'm over the moon excited, but I'm less worried. And I think you have opportunities here for this bullpen to be a strength. Will it? I don't know. There's just so many guys that their seasons could go one way or the other. It's going to be fascinating to watch how the Reds decide to give up this right now. I think there's one spot that's up in the air. We know there's always going to be injuries. Maybe a guy like Tony Santillan isn't as much as a lock as he was now that there's so many options, but it'll be interesting to see where do the Reds go with those final 1, 2, 3 spots, however many it is. You could like go a bunch of different ways, right? You could go with the guys that look the best in spring that you think have the highest upside. Like maybe you throw Graham Ashcraft there. Maybe you put Zach Maxwell on the roster. You could go with, some safer guys like Alex Young, like maybe even like Staumont, that you can Jabot, you can put them on the roster. They're a little more proven, and then you could kind of save the Maxwells and the Graham Ashcrafts even potentially for down the road, because they have options. They can be sent down to the minor leagues. There's multiple ways that you can go about this, so it'll be kind of interesting what the Reds ultimately decide to do. Important to remember, a lot of off days in April, off day every week. So you don't necessarily need as many arms early in the year. So it'll be interesting kind of how the Reds use this and how much they honestly might manipulate the bullpen early in the year to kind of, prepare for 162, because that's the most underrated part of bullpen management is managing 162. I don't think I'm a firm believer you can't always have the best 8 guys in your bullpen. If you want to have the best season overall for the bullpen, you have to manipulate it. And that's what, the Reds have done. And to be honest, Craig, the Reds have done pretty well with these minor league signings in the bullpen. I wish they would maybe do a little bit better with their development of guys. I hope Maxwell and May prove to be a new era of Reds bullpen development. But they've been like Jabot. I mean, he's been great. He was a minor league. He was not a minor league guy, but he was a DFA guy they picked up. The Reds have done pretty good with those over the years. Not saying that's a sure thing. You're going to keep hitting on those over and over again. Might be one of those things where maybe you're due for some regression in that, but they have done pretty well in that overall.
Yeah, it's funny. I think when you made this graphic a couple of weeks ago, I actually want to leave it up for a second if that's okay. When you made this graphic a couple of weeks ago, it's funny because you put it as bullpen locks, and at the time there were really only like 6 or 7 guys on there. And I think that since the moves that have been made over the last couple of weeks, there's very few guys who are actually locks anymore on this list. I think guys like Alexis Diaz, Taylor Rogers, Emilio Pagan with this payroll, Tony Moll, locks. Barlow, Suter, Santillan, I don't know. I find it hard to believe that Suter doesn't find a role on this squad. I find it hard to believe that they would go out and sign Scott Barlow and not have a role for him on the team. You mentioned Santillan. Maybe he's not as much of a lock, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Fill out this last spot in your bullpen just based on your expectations, not based on, I think last time we did this, I asked you if everything goes perfectly for everybody, who earns that spot. I'm going to ask you this time, what's your prediction of actually who earns that spot and who the Reds put on their opening day roster in that last slot?
Man, it's tough. I still think Alex Young to me probably has the biggest upper hand going into this. Maybe Staumont, maybe he's there as well. My gut tells me it would be one of Young, Staumont, or Jabot. They'll go with one of the more veteran guys that they need to keep. Now, if I understand correctly, there's so many different languages put in these minor league signings. There's quite a wide range, and we don't know exactly what these minor league contracts look like. So that also might play a big key in it. Some of these guys may have an opt-out at the end of spring training. Some of these guys might have an opt-out at the end of April. Some of these guys could be later than that. So if it's one of these guys that if one of those 3 have an opt-out at the end of spring training and the other 2 have an opt-out at the end of April, well, the guy that has the opt-out at the end of spring training is going to have the upper hand because, again, you're wanting to keep as many options as you can for the rest of the year. But I don't believe that information is public, at least in terms of like everyone listed. You might be able to find, something reported about one of them or the other. But that's going to come into this as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I also don't know, Craig, how I feel about this last spot. I don't know if I want them to just say, hey, put the best guy available on there. Normally, I would be more of the 162 guy. The issue is I don't see a lot of guys in the Reds bullpen right now that are a bona fide above average arm. I see a lot of like solid arms. So that's why I kind of almost lean more towards wanting them to throw one of the high upside arms on there just to kind of maybe balance out that bullpen and give them one option of a guy that could turn into the next, I would say, Fernando Cruz. I know he did end up as well, but that type of mold.
It's funny. I saw some people on social media today saying that if this was 2021, this bullpen would be elite, but it is not 2021 anymore. It is 2025. Pitchers and catchers will continue to work out for the rest of this week. And then on Saturday, February 15th, position players report, and we get our first glimpse at the Cincinnati Reds spring training games on February 26th, a split squad to start it off against the Guardians and the Brewers. As always, Nick and I will be here with any breaking news on Chatterbox Reds as it comes up, if there is more to be covered. And throughout spring training, we'll have you covered with all the latest and greatest Reds news. For Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Reds.